Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anthony Gaudiano, right off the boat, as you can see. Been attending this congregation, I don't know, 12, 13, maybe 15 years. And occasionally, when I talk to people, I use the sacred name. And it's amazing sometimes. It comes as a surprise to them. And sometimes they say, oh, well, I heard it a different way, or this, that, and the other. The name that we use here, Yahweh, is from a pronunciation that was derived by a Hebrew linguist. And I want to underline and capitalize and put in parentheses and exclamation points. He's a Hebrew linguist, not some person who has a website and comes up with a name. Now, he may be wrong, and therefore we may be wrong. But some years ago at Bernice's house, I think most of you may remember Bernice. Sorry she couldn't be here today. But one of the members of this congregation, Frank, used to bring old copies of Bible Archaeology Review, and he would put them on this kind of a desk that she had. And I had subscribed to BAR many years before, and so I was pleased to find this issue. And I thumbed through it, and lo and behold, in the letters to the editor was a name that I recognized. And I just couldn't read it fast enough. Well, the letters were written by Professor Anson Rainey. He just recently passed away, but he's a professor of Semitic cultures, professor of ancient Near East cultures and Semitic languages. And he knows Hebrew back and forth, Greek. He can read those little clay tablets. And he used to make some side money from teaching at the university by bidding on contracts to translate more tablets as they were found over the years. So he knows his stuff. So I'm going to read the paper. I have some here which people here can have if they wish. Let me just start from the top. I'll read as fast as I can. Occasionally there are questions about linguistics and pronunciation of the sacred name. The answer to such questions are believable only if they are from those who have recognized credentials in Semitic languages, culture, and archaeology. And please remember those three conditions. The following letters were sent to Bible Archaeology Review magazine in response to repeated error by a member of BAR's staff. This is a guy, they write stories in there. Things might be found in Israel and so forth, and there'll be a fellow who will report on it. The letters are self-explanatory and provide detailed answers about the sacred name which most people seek. Consider the credentials of the author and the date of his letters, which are separated by 9 years. I subscribed to the magazine and I read it, let my subscription lapse. 9 years later, Bertie Sunday's house, here's a second letter that he wrote. So I'm now going to read both letters. They're kind of short. And this is in the editorial column. He's responding to something that one of the reporters in BAR wrote. And he's taking the time and trouble to respond to it because the author made a mistake. To the editor, an editorial note in BAR, November, December 1984, 21 years ago, states that the pronunciation of Yahweh for the Tetragrammaton is by, quote, scholarly convention, unquote. It should be noted that there are many strong linguistic and epigraphic arguments in favor of Yahweh as the correct form. There are Greek transcriptions from religious papyri in Egypt. There are personal names in biblical Hebrew ending in Y-A-H-U which is the typical short form, and he has in parentheses, Jussive, comma, i.e. commands and past tense. So this Yusuf is a grammatical term for Hebrew. The term, the verb forms for the particular type in which the last two consonants were originally W-A-W, and in parentheses W, and Y-O-D, and in parentheses Y. The long form of those same verbs end in EH. The anglicized form, Jehovah, is a ghost word based on the four consonants YHWH with the vowels of another word, Adonai, meaning my Lord. The Hebrew scribes of the Middle Ages put those vowels in to remind the reader to say Adonai rather than pronounce the sacred name. The sacred name was known, and they put these vowels from Adonai to prevent somebody from inadvertently saying the person's name. But the name was not lost. That's a popular misconception. But in the first syllable, they nevertheless put an E rather than an A, so as not to cause anyone to see the symbol YA and inadvertently blurt out the sacred name! Exclamation point. This is just further proof of the correct first syllable, which in any case is confirmed by Greek spelling and the evidence of Hebrew linguistics. So Yahweh is not just some sort of scholarly convention. And that was the phrase that the author had used in his piece, that Yahweh was just some sort of scholarly convention. Signed, Professor Anson Rainey, Tel Aviv University, Tel Aviv, Israel. So here's a professor of Hebrew at Hebrew University in Hebrew in Tel Aviv, Hebrew. Bible Archaeology Review, September, October 1994. This is the issue that I saw in Bernice's house. And the title of it was How Yahweh Was Pronounced, to the editor. And he's a little ticked off. And when I read how he wrote this, you'll kind of get that impression. You done it again. In a footnote to Jay Glenn's article, May, June 1994, on page 53, you say, no one knows how Yahweh was YHWH was pronounced, but it is usually vocalized as Yahweh. This, despite the fact you had published my letter, How Was the Grammaton Pronounced, in the July-August 1985 issue, the one I just read, in which I gave epigraphic and linguistic evidence in support of the pronunciation Yahweh. I'm still getting correspondence from all over the world in response to that letter. And that's true, because I happen to be one of them. First, I mentioned the evidence from Greek manuscripts in religious papyri found in Egypt. In the best of these, I-A-O-U-I-E-E, this is from the London Papyri, page 446 to 482. Clement of Alexandria, now he's one of the apostolic fathers. The mystic name, which is called the Tetragrammaton, is pronounced I-A-O-U-E, which means who is and who shall be. The internal evidence from the Hebrew language is generally strong and confirms the accuracy of the Greek transcription. Yahweh is from a verbal root H-W-Y, means to be. This root usually shows up in Hebrew as H-Y-Y. It is a verbal root developed from the third person pronoun H-U-W-A/H-I-Y-A. The grammatical proof of Yahweh is the third person masculine singular of prefix conjugation. The YA is the third person masculine singular prefix. If you see a variant name or somebody is offering a variant name, see what their credentials are first and see if they can justify what they're advocating with a description of the grammatical terms as this professor did. In Jewish tradition, it is forbidden to pronounce the sacred name, and its true pronunciation is supposed to remain secret. The fact is that Jewish tradents, parentheses, who put the vowel points in the Hebrew text, close parentheses, borrowed the vowels from another word, either Adonai, my lords, or Elohim, capital G-O-D. They avoided the very short A vowel in this borrowing because it might have led to the synagogue reader to make a mistake and pronounce the first syllable in the sacred name, namely YA. The vocalized form one finds in the Hebrew Bible is usually YEHOWAH, from which we get in English the form Jehovah. YEHOWAH/JEHOVAH is nothing but an artificial ghost word. It was never used in antiquity. The synagogue reader saw YEHOWAH and read it as ADONI. That's what he had been taught to do. The first syllable of Yahweh, E with H-E, is normal for the imperfect indicative form, present, future, or past conjugations. A form like Yahweh developed from YAHWIYU. This development of IYU to EH is thoroughly demonstrated for the verbal system in general. The form YAHWEH seems to be from the causative stem, in parentheses, here's another Hebrew grammatical term, HIFIL, Hifil, close parentheses, and apparently means he causes to be, become. The theophoric component on so many personal names in Judah, YAHU, in some names as Hezekiah, which is Hezekiah, is the normal shortened form of the verb like YAHWEH. For example, the verb to do obeisance in the imperfect is YISTAHAWE, while the shortened form, parentheses, for PRETERIT or JUSSIVE. These are the two forms. Preteric or Joseph is YISTHTAHU. In other words, Yitzayahu is to Yitza as YAHU is to YAHWEH. This is not hocus pocus. Any layman can readily comprehend the equation. You don't like to put linguistic details in bar. They're too, quote, technical, unquote. But this does not prevent you from preventing various items of linguistic misinformation, printing various items of linguistic misinformation without warning your readership. Here I refer to the description of the final component, parentheses, not a prefix, but a component, exclamation point, close parentheses, on personal names found in seal impressions. I use a little clay cylinders, and they have carved around them person's name and some symbols, and whenever they would seal something in soft clay, they'd roll it over the clay and it'd leave an impression. Everybody, it was kind of like later done in wax. Today, signed over. Here I refer to the description of the final component, parentheses, not a suffix but a component, on personal names found in seal impression. The theophoric component in northern Israel, personal names written YW on epigraphic text was never pronounced YO. The final W did not come into use as a marker for the final O vowel until the post-exilic period. In the 8th and 7th centuries, when we have these personal names ending in YW, the W was a consonant and the pronunciation was YAW, parentheses, or YAU, close parentheses. So anyone can see the difference between the northern YAW and the southern YAHU is not so great, especially since the H in the southern form was fairly weak. Israelite archaeologists avoid Hebrew linguistics like it was poison ivy. Thus, on the basis of modern pronunciation, without asking any linguists, they have created ghost words like medio, zeko, or gadio in Sumerian Ostraca. In your Dan article cited above, the W in those names should be pronounced like the W in words like Ragliv or his 2 feet, written RGLYW. And notice it's in consonants, of course. Compare Genesis 24:32. Et pasium. Israelites, of course, pronounced that form Raglav because of the European background of so many revisers of modern Hebrew. Incidentally, that same European background is where we get the V in Jehovah instead of the original W. The V in Jehovah instead of the regular W. It also happens in Yahweh. It was originally W-A-W. Obviously, my letter in 1985 did not impress you, but the evidence for Yahweh as the correct pronunciation for the sacred name is at least as strong as the view that Sennacherib was destroyed in the Lashes Stratum 3. He's talking about evidence in archaeological excavation. They usually look for a black layer, which was buildings, wood that had burned, and these were ashes. The same can be said for the pronunciation YAW and not YO. At least you could ask a scholar whose opinion you do respect, such as Frank Cross or Joseph Navid or André Lemaire. The last fellow is a pretty famous French archaeologist. His articles appear in Bar magazine. Now, finishing up. Speaking of Lemaire, I heartily endorse his new reading of BYTDWD as House of David on the Misha Stele. House of David, the name of the article was House of David Restored in Moabite Transcription, May, June of 1994. Furthermore, I have a gut feeling that both the Misha and Dan inscriptions have to do with events in 853 to 851 BCE, namely the battle in which Ahab, king of Israel, died while his ally Jehoshaphat escaped unharmed, and the later invasion of Moab, I think the king of Damascus, parentheses, not a vassal, as pointed out recently by S. Artuv in the Israeli Exploration Journal, close parentheses, set up the stele in Dan to commemorate that victory. Likewise, The closing of the Mishnah stele probably have to do with the invasion of Moab by Jehoshaphat and Ahab's son Joram, as depicted in 2 Kings 3. Many Bible scholars deny that Ahab died a violent death or that Jehoshaphat took part in war recounted in 2 Kings 3. After poring over all the evidence and all the arguments for over 20 years, I am convinced that these negative arguments are specious and that the Bible testimony to both events is reliable, historically and chronologically. One may refer to maps 126 to 130 and so forth. Signed, Anson Rainey, professor of ancient Near East culture and Semitic languages, Tel Aviv, Israel. So I'll for anyone who wants to hear copies of this, and I have in this ring binder. I won't read it, but some years ago there was a Presbyterian minister who was going to Uganda, and we had ongoing discussions about the sacred name. And so I thought, well, he's going to take a long plane ride. He needs something to read. So I copied this there from dictionaries, from Webster's Ninth Collegiate Dictionary, the Scriptures Bible, which is the restored Bible we use here, the preface, the Book of Yahweh, the Jerusalem Bible. Most people don't have a copy of it or access to it. It uses the word Yahweh. There you go. And I'm emphasizing this. Here's Do-It-Yourself Hebrew and Greek by Edward Goodrick. He was somewhat famous as a teacher, but by the time I got this Do-It-Yourself book and got ready to learn Hebrew, he died. Unfortunate, but it happened. He says about Jehovah, the only thing you can say you can be certain about is that Jehovah is not the way the word should be pronounced or sounded. And that was the thrust of my presenting this material to that minister. And I'll finish up here. Here's one from Jehovah's Witnesses. If any of you have ever wondered who has done the most work in researching where the Tetragrammaton appears worldwide, it is the Jehovah's Witnesses. Here's what they say. Yahweh is simply an attempt to express God's name in a form nearer to the original Hebrew. Why would you not do that? You know. And he says, nevertheless, many Hebrew scholars say that Yahweh is a more correct, but Rudolf Kittel, the editor of Biblical Hebraica, pronounces the Hebrew Tetragrammaton as YEHWAH in all his editions. Now you'll see that occasionally. Here again is something from the Witnesses. Now they come and knock on my door all the time, and I stop whatever I'm doing and invite them to come in. Aid to Bible Understanding. This is a publication by the Witnesses, and in under Jehovah, it says Jehovah is the best known English pronunciation of the divine name. Yahweh is favored by most Hebrew scholars. Why persist in something that's incorrect when the scholarship says don't do it no more? I'm not going to go through all of that. If I find the one I want real quick. Of course, everybody knows Jacob Meyer in his book, The Memorial Name Yahweh. I recommend that book because he's put together a lot of facts in one place. Here's one of his papers where he talks about the frequency of the occurrence of the divine name about 8,000 times and so forth. So, you know, I would escort my wife to the local Presbyterian church, and while I'm sitting there, the first thing I do is pull out the hymn book and look to see how many hymns have the word Jehovah. Well, I found out who the printer was. It's in the preface, and I wrote him a letter. See if I can find that letter. This is a great commission publications. This is his response. I won't read the letter, but in my letter, I'll just do it. Please bear with me. While visiting a local Presbyterian church, this is to Lawrence C. Rolfe, editor, Great Commission Publications, Old York Road, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Subject, GCP Trinity Hymnals perpetuates an error. I let him have it right up front. Dear sir, while visiting a local Presbyterian church, I noted a GCP Trinity hymnal that had 38 of the 741 hymns contained a no error. The error is the word Jehovah. The error occurred in the year 1270 by Raimundus Martini, a Spanish monk of the Dominican order. He erroneously translated the sacred name from Hebrew into Latin in his book Pugio Fidei, that means dagger. Although the error was immediately challenged, and that challenge is in the preface of the Bible that I just mentioned, it has perpetuated due to poor scholarship and lack of courage to change the status quo. I have a large collection of evidence confirming the error in the attachment is typical. Note the nuances in the derivation of the sacred name, and that was the letters from Anson Rainey, and the credibility of the source. The most complete report about the error, to their credit, is from the very religious article which espouses the error in the name of the organization, the Jehovah's Witnesses. I would be pleased to send you a copy of their publication. My reasoning for writing is concerned that perpetuation of the error in religious service constitute worshiping a false idol. To me, this is a clear violation of the first commandment. The eternal consequence of those who knowingly violate this commandment and cause innocent children to do so is known. Accordingly, I respectfully request that your organization give serious consideration to deleting hymns with the error from the next revision of your GCP Trinity hymnal. May I hear from you in this letter? He replies back, Mr. Gaudiano, thank you for your letter regarding the use of the word Jehovah as a name of God in the Trinity hymn. I have forwarded your letter to one of our editorial staff to study your admonition and the evidence to quote. Certainly, if the use of this term is out of accord with the Word of God and our appropriate humoretic principles, we do not wish to perpetuate such an error. And I read this. I have another one here too. I read this letter as an example and as a call for action. If you have an opportunity or something like I did here with this publisher, take a pen and pencil, write to them. Because unless we do, this error, this mistake will be perpetuated forever. Thank you.
Hallelujah.